The summit was supposed to be a formal event, polished speeches, awkward handshakes, and promises dressed in the language of diplomacy. But the moment Captain Ibrahim Traoré leaned into the microphone and stated, "Mr. Trump, you deceived the world," the illusion collapsed. The atmosphere in the hall thickened, a silence so dense it carried the weight of generations of suffering. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't hesitate. Instead, he spoke of the things everyone preferred to ignore: children buried beneath the sands, mothers cooking meals for sons who'd never come home, villages turned to ash under the guise of foreign assistance. And just when it felt like no more could be exposed, a name surfaced in the secret documents. Victoria Langston. Elegant, influential, untouchable. But truth has a sound, and it cracked her silence like lightning in a storm. One boy's voice broke the world's heart. One woman's words set fire to her rage. This wasn't politics. It was a reckoning. The truth no longer whispered. The eyes of children were fixed on the stage. Soon, Ibrahim Traoré versus the system, the summit that changed history. But first, tell us where you're watching this video from. And if you enjoy it, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. The city of Geneva, wrapped in the haze of early morning fog, stirred with the arrival of power. Inside the marble chambers of the Global Peace and Development Summit, the D-Day world wasn't gathering to celebrate peace, but to negotiate its illusion. Presidents, diplomats, corporate leaders, military strategists filled the hall. Every step rehearsed, every smile calculated. Flags from every nation framed the stage like theater. Curtains before a performance few realized would alter everything. At the center sat Captain Ibrahim Traoré, steady, composed. His crisp, plain military uniform contrasted the sea of tailored suits and polished metals. His presence wasn't performative, carried an undeniable weight that demanded attention without seeking it. He didn't fidget with papers. He didn't adjust his chair. He simply waited. Across the room, former U.S. President Donald Trump casually scanned the audience. His expression familiar, red tie perfect, smile controlled. To many, this was just another summit, another rehearsed exchange of platitudes. But the air hinted otherwise, dense and heavy. Like a courtroom awaiting a verdict, nearby Victoria Langston lingered on the sidelines, the face of diplomatic control. Her gray suit immaculate, clipboard of sealed documents in her grip. She was the strategist no one noticed, the hand behind aid policies, behind carefully crafted press statements, behind silences that concealed harsh realities. No applause echoed. No small talk. The room held a quiet tension, thick like the moments before a thunderstorm, when the wind dies and birds fall silent. And in that waiting stillness, the world braced itself. The lights dimmed. The moderator stepped forward to begin. Cameras from global networks flicked on, their red indicators blinking like sniper dots across the polished stage. A hush settled, not out of respect but unease. Anticipation hung sharp in the air. Trump leaned forward, mic inches from his mouth, his trademark confidence flashing behind his grin. His voice broke the silence, carefully crafted, undeniably rehearsed. The world was safer, he declared, when America led. Adjusting his cufflinks, he nodded, as though stating the obvious. We gave Africa billions. Aid, education, stability. And what did we get in return? He paused. Nothing. That word dropped like a stone. Some officials nodded automatically. Others stiffened. Reporters hesitated mid-sentence. It was the same tired narrative. America, the generous. Africa, the dependent. Dusted off, repackaged for yet another global stage. But one man refused to play along. Ibrahim Traoré slowly lifted his head. His expression was unreadable. No smirk, no sneer. Just a calm, focused stare that sliced through the diplomatic. Fog like sunlight through stained glass, his hands stayed folded. He didn't lean in. He didn't need to. His words landed like an earthquake. Mr. Trump, you deceived the world. The room froze. The words didn't echo, they detonated. A gasp rippled across the hall like the first gust before a storm. A woman near the back pressed a hand to her chest. A delegate from Senegal lowered his gaze. A French diplomat dropped his pen visibly. Shaken, from the media gallery, a reporter whispered, "Did he really just say that?" Cameras zoomed in, Ibrahim's face, composed, unshaken. Trump blinked. He leaned back, surprise flickering briefly across his face. His lips parted, then shut again. His posture wavered, if only slightly. But Ibrahim wasn't finished. "You lied about us. You lied about helping us," he continued. His voice steady. "You staged promises, handshakes for the cameras, press conferences with words like partnership and progress. But when the cameras left, you abandoned us with debt, with sanctions, with silence, with grief." The translator's voice carried his words across earpieces in multiple languages. The room leaned in, not out of politeness, but necessity. Suddenly, the truth was being spoken in a hall designed to suppress it. Trump scoffed, shifting in his seat. "We gave aid. We saved millions. That's a fact. If you're watching on the go, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications." Ibrahim paused. He scanned the room. His voice remained calm, deliberate. "Do you know what your aid really did, Mr. Trump?" Silence was suffocating, wholly even. "It fed warlords," Ibrahim declared. Each word deliberate, striking the air like stones cast into still water. It destroyed farms. It crippled markets. It lined the pockets of the corrupt, while the hands of our children remained empty. Your companies came, took our gold, our oil, our labor, and left our people starving, sick, broken. Gasps erupted. Not only in the room, but across social media. Live feeds from CNN, BBC, all cut to breaking headlines. Traoré confronts Trump at Global Summit. In the shadows, Victoria Langston's eyes narrowed, not with outrage, but calculation. She whispered to an aide, who quickly left, tablet clutched to his chest. Her face unreadable, but her mind racing. A Nigerian diplomat leaned to a colleague. "He's saying what we've all thought for years?" A young African-American journalist lowered her pen, stunned. Back in Burkina Faso, a 12-year-old boy sat beside his grandmother in a dusty refugee camp. "Grandma," he whispered, "he's not afraid." His grandmother didn't speak. She only nodded, eyes glassy with tears. Trump leaned in again, voice taut, confidence fraying. "I helped your country survive." But Ibrahim didn't flinch. He let Trump finish, then replied softly, unshaken, "No. You helped us depend." The illusion shattered. No applause followed. No one defended the old narrative. The room, the journalists, the guards at the exits, all frozen under the weight of undeniable truth. The moderator shifted uncomfortably. Trump reached for his water glass, his hand trembling faintly, not from fear, but from exposure. In the corner, Victoria Langston's lips tightened, the faintest, most dangerous smile. She recognized what others were only beginning to grasp. The world wasn't just listening, it was awakening. The silence after Ibrahim Traoré's words was in tea. Awkward, it was seismic. The translator's voice repeated Ibrahim's final line. In French, Arabic, Mandarin, "You helped us depend." The hall remained still, no claps. Just the oppressive silence of a truth finally spoken aloud. Ibrahim sat firm, voice calm, measured, not as a politician, not as a performer, but as a man who'd endured too long in silence. And now that he'd begun, there was no turning back. "You speak of billions in aid," he continued, eyes locked on Trump. "But you never ask where it went. What it built, or what it destroyed." He leaned forward, not for theatrics, but because the next truth demanded closeness. "That money, Mr. Trump, didn't build schools. It built silence, dependency. It empowered warlords, propped up corruption, flooded our markets with your subsidized goods while our farmers starved. Entire villages crumbled under promises made with strings so tight they choked the very people they claimed to help." Trump shifted uncomfortably. His usual bravado cracked, replaced by discomfort. His gaze darted, searching for an ally in a crowd that wasn't clapping anymore. Ibrahim's voice remained unchanged, but sharper, cutting deeper. You speak of saving lives, but I've walked through the ashes of villages, buried children not killed by bombs, but by your policies. Your economic reforms, your stabilization forces who emptied our wells, scattered landmines across our fields. He paused, not for breath, but because the room needed it. They arrived under banners of freedom, Ibrahim continued. But they left carrying our copper, our coltan, our future, and left behind hunger, sickness, graves. Trump forced a weak chuckle, a trick that had served him well with tough reporters, late-night critics. But this wasn't a debate. Ibrahim wasn't an opponent. He was a witness, a survivor, and no smirk could erase that. I don't know what you're talking about, Trump muttered, straightening his tie. We sent food, medicine, protection. But Ibrahim softly interrupted. You sent contracts? Defense contractors? Infrastructure deals that demanded more from us than they ever delivered. Charity with a receipt attached. Then he spoke. The words that cracked the room wide open. You sent hope, wrapped in debt. A gasp swept through the audience. Not for the words alone, but for their familiarity. Delegates from Kenya, Bangladesh, Bolivia shifted in their seats, all carrying versions of the same wound. It wasn't just Africa's story, it was a global one, a pattern of power masked as generosity. In the press corner, Victoria Langston stood motionless. No flinch, no whisper. Just a subtle nod to an aide who slipped away, tablet pressed to his chest. She'd seen this moment coming. She always did. Her signature was on the aid programs Ibrahim now condemned. Food initiatives that fed no one. Security plans that destabilized regions. Now, her hidden work lay exposed by a soldier in uniform with no script, no agenda. Only the raw weight of truth. Trump's voice rose, desperate for control. Without America, your governments would have collapsed. We gave you markets, weapons to defend yourselves, to fight who? Ibrahim interjected. Wars that were. Never ours fought to defend borders drawn by foreign hands, to control our people with weapons gifted to our oppressors. He didn't need to shout. His silence carried more weight, that so-called aid. It was never help, it was fuel, poured carefully to keep the flames alive. Long enough for your companies to finish extracting everything they wanted. In the shadows, Victoria stayed still. Eyes scanning the crowd like a strategist reading the battlefield, she leaned toward her hidden earpiece and whispered, "Track the social pulse. Cut the satellite if the numbers spike beyond acceptable." She didn't fear words. She feared what followed when those words finally reached the living rooms of voters. Campaign donors, veterans, grieving parents. Ibrahim straightened, letting the hush settle for a moment, then delivered the final strike. American aid, he stated, isn't generosity, it's control. The hall didn't erupt. No clapping, no shouting, just a heavy, breathless silence. A diplomat from Ghana bowed her head in quiet prayer. A translator wiped his eyes, unaware of the gesture. Even some U.S. senators seated high above exchanged uneasy looks, shaken as the world absorbed the moment. Ibrahim's hands folded calmly. His gaze drifted from Trump to the seated leaders, then toward the shadows where Victoria Langston stood. She didn't flinch. Their eyes met briefly, without expression, without remorse. If you're watching on your commute, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell. It wasn't finished, not remotely. The pause that followed wasn't uncertainty, it was reverence. The stillness that follows when something undeniable is spoken. Ibrahim remained quiet, not to collect himself, but to let the weight of his words settle like dust after a fallen monument. Then his voice returned, slower, softer, like telling an old memory, not addressing a crowd, but speaking to something buried inside him. I remember a boy, he began, his tone now wrapped not in anger, but sorrow. His name was Adama. The room leaned forward. He was 12. His family lived in a small village called Jibo. His father owned a patch of land enough to grow maize and cassava. Adama would draw on the dirt with a stick, always the same tree, its roots first wide, deep, its branches reaching like open arms. Ibrahim's eyes drifted far beyond the marble walls and polished chandeliers. One afternoon, a drone circled overhead, he continued, voice barely above a whisper. By morning, Adama and his father were gone. Their home rubble. The tree, ashes. The official report called it a mistake. Collateral damage, no consequences. No officials came. Only silence. Ibrahim paused, breathing through grief that didn't need permission. That boy, he said, never held a weapon, never raised his voice. But he died eyes wide open, staring at a sky that promised peace and delivered fire. A Jordanian diplomat shifted uncomfortably. A Bolivian delegate covered her mouth with her hand in the press gallery. A veteran Ghanaian journalist lowered her camera, wiping a quiet tear. Still, Trump said nothing. His head dipped, fists clenched on the table. He didn't deny, he didn't defend, but his silence was louder than any excuse. Ibrahim's voice didn't rise, but it deepened, raw and personal. You speak of aid, of stability, of progress. But Adama didn't die for lack of aid. He died because, in your calculus, we were too small to matter. He vanished because someone, staring at a screen, marked his village, potential threat. Almost as if the moment itself required it, Ibrahim reached into his coat. He produced a photograph, old, edges frayed. He held it up to the cameras, to the hall, to history. This was taken 2 weeks before he died. Behind him, the screen lit up. Adayam, barefoot, smiling, a pencil in one hand, a plastic bag in the other. Inside the bag, a crumpled piece of paper, his notebook, he told me. Ibrahim's voice shook slightly, that one day he would draw the whole sky. And with that, the room cracked, not with noise, but with grief. Some delegates looked away. Others dropped their gaze. An American journalist muttered under his breath, Jesus. The screen flickered. A charred skeletal tree appeared. Adama's tree, blackened wood, ashes scattered in the wind, that Ibrahim said softly, is all that remains. He returned the photo to his pocket like placing a sacred item. Back in its shrine, Victoria Langston didn't blink. She watched from the shadows, arms folded, face unreadable. She had seen photos like that before. Hundreds. They crossed her desk, with sterile reports labeled unintended strike or target reclassified. But no document could silence Adama's eyes. No memo could erase what the world had just seen. Ibrahim cleared his throat, steadying his voice against the weight of his sorrow. This summit, he declared, isn't about trade or profits. It's about souls. It's about children who fall asleep sketching stars in the dirt and never wake again. It's about mothers who bury their hopes before they can even speak them. And men like you, Mr. Trump, who shook hands with tyrants while we buried our dead. The room fell into silence, heavy, enduring. Hands trembled. Tears slipped. Unhidden, not for politics, but for Adama. Trump's eyes dropped. His shoulders rigid. A man known for bravado, silent. Victoria remained unmoving. She didn't need to speak. Her absence of empathy had already filled the space. The cold poise of a bureaucrat only amplified the ache hanging in the air. Ibrahim folded his hands, containing what little composure he still held. There are children watching this, he continued, voice low. Children who've lost more than any of us here could imagine. And all they want to know is if the world sees them or just their resources. He paused, standing still. Then quietly he sat, not with triumph, but mourning. The truth was spoken. But the children were still waiting. The hall was so quiet. Silence seemed alive, humming with the weight of what had passed. Adama's smile lingered on screen, wide-eyed, full of wonder, unaware the world would mourn him in whispers and headlines. The photo faded to black dot. No one dared move. Even the cameras froze, as if the story itself held its breath. Then, a figure rose, wrapped in an earthen shawl, her face etched not by age but grief. She stood alone, no title, no fanfare, only presence. Her voice, when it came, was even low, steady. "From years of quiet endurance, my name is Marilyn Duval," she said. "I am Adama's mother." The air chilled. Chairs creaked as officials shifted. Uneasy, every gaze turned to her, not in curiosity but in reverence. The moderator, ready to speak again, stopped mid-sentence, sat down, wordless. Marilyn stood, uninvited, yet more powerful than any president present. She carried no documents, no prepared remarks, only loss, my son. She began slowly, dreamed of teaching, not terror. The words cut deeper than any speech, not because they were grand, but because they were real. A tremor rippled through the room. A Dutch delegate lowered her head, trembling. A Canadian placed a hand on his chest. Tissues were quietly drawn, no one hiding it. But Marilyn didn't weep. Her tears had fallen long ago, in places no journalist had ever seen. She wasn't here to display grief. She was here to remind the world her son existed. That he lived, dreamed, died, for nothing more than being born in the wrong place. Beneath the wrong sky, I watched him draw stars in the dirt, she continued. "We couldn't afford books," told me Mama. "One day I'll write poems on the chalkboard for other children." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile made of hope. Not answers. Her eyes found Ibrahim. They exchanged no words. They didn't need to. "You remembered him," she whispered. "When no one else did. Not my government. Not the UN. Not those who sent drones and condolences." In the same breath, if you're watching this on your commute, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Ibrahim rose slowly, not with fire or fury, but with humility. He bowed deep, genuine, to a mother with nothing left but dignity. And in that simple bow, the impossible happened. The room didn't erupt, didn't cheer, didn't applaud. They wept, not for borders, not for politics, but for Adama. The boy who would never scrawl his name across a chalkboard, whose textbooks were dreams drawn. In the dirt, whose memory stood before the most powerful men and women on earth, not seeking revenge, but speaking truth. "I didn't come to accuse," Marilyn said. "I came because I have one thing left, my son's memory. If I don't speak it, he will be forgotten, like all the others." Trump sat frozen, his trademark confidence gone, his expression unreadable. For once, he realized no talking points, no advisors. No version of this moment could make him look good. Marilyn turned to him. "You may not have pulled the trigger," she whispered, "but your silence pulled something worse." The words fell soft, but hit with the force of thunder. Even Victoria, hidden behind the curtains of diplomacy, blinked, her posture faltering ever so slightly. For a woman built of calculation, even a crack meant everything. There are moments when history tilts, not through policy, but presence. Marilyn Duval, standing alone. Sympathy, she sat quietly, as the air itself seemed to pause in reverence. Ibrahim stayed standing, only for a few seconds longer then. Sat folding his hands, not in defense but respect. Adama was no longer a statistic. He was a face, a symbol. The world could no longer look away. The silence that followed. Marilyn's quiet testimony wrapped the room like smoke after. Fire, heavy, sorrowful, unforgettable. Her words left a fracture in the walls that no statement could mend. Into that fracture, Ibrahim stepped, not to soothe, but to expose from beneath the table. He retrieved a plain, worn leather folder. No crest, no emblem, the kind used by soldiers. By clerks, its simplicity made it heavier than gold. "This," he declared, holding it up. "It's not a speech, it's not protest, it's evidence." Behind him, the screen flickered. First, a blurry satellite image, a green village, homes clustered, a tin-roofed school. The crowd squinted, sure. The next image appeared. Same location, reduced to ash, to smoke. A quiet gasp rippled across the hall. Ibrahim's voice didn't rise, it only sharpened. This was new. A farming village. Population 146. No bases, no militants, just families. He turned the page. The lights dimmed, the screen flickered to life. Displaying a censored military transmission, suspected enemy movement, it read, below, in bold letters, minimal fallout if eliminated. He paused, letting those words settle. Over the crowd, then went on. This, he stated, is what your intelligence labeled as neutral. This is what your advisors described as the gray zone. And this is what your algorithms classified as disposable. The next file appeared. A chain of internal emails, government strategists, private firms, policy think tanks, subject line, agricultural disruption zones. On one page, a handwritten message emerged. Ink neat, sharp, unmistakably exact, neutralize target zones, justify through food security initiative. Beneath the note, a signature, Victoria Langston. The atmosphere drained of air. Wasn't that? Her name hadn't surfaced before it had, but until now. Her influence lived behind layers of bureaucracy, distant from the tangible consequences of her directives. But now the proof lay exposed, undeniable, irrefutable, black ink on white paper. Ibrahim didn't glance at her. He didn't need to. Around him, the chamber stirred, paper shuffled, chairs creaked, eyes darted nervously across geopolitical boundaries. Even the most seasoned diplomats began to falter under the rising unease. I was assured, Ibrahim pressed on, that the initiatives her office championed aimed to stabilize, to foster food security, to empower communities. His voice sharpened, but these documents reveal a colder reality, war repackaged as reform. He held up a map speckled with crimson pins stretching across West Africa. Every red mark represents a community erased, not by chance, not by rogue elements. By choices made in polished boardrooms, by people in spotless suits. His voice broke, barely enough to betray that this wasn't theater, but raw grief. Villages like NWU weren't invisible, he continued. They were inconvenient, so they were removed. Not just with missiles, but with words. Words like containment, restructuring, strategic realignment. He turned to the final document, a financial report. This initiative, he declared, was funded not solely by governments, but by corporations hungry for lithium, gold, cobalt resources buried beneath the homes and graves of our people. The room fell utterly silent. Even the translators froze. Finally, Ibrahim's gaze rose, not to Trump, not to the panel, but to the gallery's shadowed upper tier, where Victoria Langston sat, arms folded, jaw clenched, eyes narrowing. Just so, this summit, Ibrahim concluded, can no longer feign ignorance. And then the dam cracked. A delegate from Chile demanded the dossier. A woman from South Africa clapped once, then stopped, realizing this wasn't a moment for applause, it was for reckoning. Even Trump appeared rattled, not by the documents alone, but by the collapse of his narrative. His advisors leaned in, whispering urgently. He waved them away. Even he understood there was no spin capable of suffocating what had just unfolded. In the media rose. Phones vibrated with breaking news alerts. Victoria Langston tied to drone. Strike cover-up. Leaked files expose military actions disguised as humanitarian aid. Ibrahim Traoré unveils policy-driven ethnic cleansing, and across the globe, millions watched, transfixed. The words didn't sound like conspiracy theories. It didn't sound like politics. They sounded like truth. Victoria didn't stand. She didn't speak. She remained seated, still calculating because she grasped what few others yet understood. This wasn't about policy anymore. It was about legacy. And hers was now scrawled in ash, in blood. In ink, the documents alone hadn't ignited the room. It was the images, satellite maps, the clinical phrase neutralized target zones. Justify with food security rollout, they had shaken the foundation. But what happened next shattered every illusion completely, from the chamber's left wing among the ex-diplomats. Tired generals, silent observers, a man slowly rose. His hair was silver, his frame hunched, but his voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of a man silenced for too long. "My name is Harold McKinney," announced. steady but subdued, just loud enough for the microphones. I served as Deputy Liaison for Strategic Affairs under the Continental Operations Division from 2011 to 2016. Heads turned, his credentials alone demanded attention. But what he revealed next drained the room of breath. I was present, McKinney stated. I sat in the room when the first briefings on the Mineral Quarter project for West Africa were held. I heard the language. I saw the models. I signed the authorizations. People stirred. Delegates leaned forward. But what haunts me most, he continued, voice cracking faintly, was a private meeting in Brussels. Only 4 of us present. One of them, Victoria Langston. Her name, exposed moments earlier, now hovered thick. In the air, suspended between accusation and admission, she looked at the map, McKinney whispered. And she said, "A few villages must be sacrificed. That's the cost of securing Europe's energy future." The room froze. Then erupted. A woman in the second row clamped her hand over her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "A diplomat." From Senegal rose, face flushed with fury. Voices clashed, delegates shouted. From the press section, the rapid-fire clicking of cameras filled the air. Journalists' fingers danced across their screens. A single word gained momentum, swelling. From a murmur to a chant, shame, shame, shame. It wasn't partisan, it was human. For nearly half a minute, the summit dissolved into a contained yet volcanic eruption. And through it all, Ibrahim Traoré remained silent, still as stone amidst the uproar, his gaze fixed solely on Victoria. Langston, she stood, slow and deliberate. No denials, no protests. She walked into the storm of judgment with the grace of someone who had sat in countless war rooms and understood precisely where her authority stemmed from. She faced the hall. Not with contrition, but with weary contempt. Her voice, clear as crystal, cut through the noise. That is the price of progress. The oxygen seemed to vanish. Some gasped. Others stared, stunned. A few shouted back, stripped of diplomacy, stripped of pretense. Children died. Cried, "A woman from Uganda? You call that progress?" Another yelled. Victoria didn't recoil. Her hand stayed still, posture impeccable. She wasn't there to defend, only to ensure the narrative didn't shift without her. This world, she said, cool and precise, runs on choices no one dares make. Do you believe your smartphones, your electric cars, your wind turbines appear from thin air? Someone always pays. Sometimes it's us. Sometimes it's them. Her tone held no remorse, no sympathy, only brutal efficiency. Her eyes finally found Ibrahim's for the first time directly. He didn't blink. He didn't shout. He simply held her gaze, and within it radiated the unyielding, searing force of moral clarity. Victoria hesitated, perhaps expecting someone to rise in her defense. No one did. Not a single ally, not even her aides. The machinery of influence she'd built over decades collapsed silently. Undone by one truth now laid bare, and for the first time in her calculated career, Victoria Langston stood utterly, devastatingly alone. Trump, seated nearby, glanced over, pale, tight-lipped. He recognized power better than most, and what he witnessed wasn't merely a political downfall. It was implosion. Ibrahim rose, slow and solemn, carrying not anger, but the quiet weight of victory. He approached the microphone. He didn't speak. Not yet. If you're watching this while on the move, the broadcast announcer chimed. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and activate notifications. Ibrahim let the moment breathe. Let the audience witness a man who had prevailed, not through force, but through undeniable truth. Victoria returned to her seat, hands folded neatly. But the facade had fractured. The steel had bent. The summit would proceed, but nothing would return to how it was. As the air inside the hall settled, thick with outrage, betrayal, and unbearable revelations, a heavy silence descended, the quiet aftermath of a storm. Not the conclusion of chaos, but the start of something deeper, more unsettling. The moderator, visibly rattled, voice barely steady, leaned into the mic. We will now pause for a scheduled performance by the Burkina Faso Children's Choir. No applause. No movement. Even the phrase scheduled performance sounded hollow, mechanical. It's absurd in contrast to what had transpired. The side doors opened. Small footsteps padded onto the stage. Barefoot, clothed in plain white. No choreography, no makeup. Glittering ribbons. Just presence. Just memory. 20 children. The eldest barely 12. The youngest no more than 6. Carried on their shoulders something unseen, but heavy. The weight of loss. The absence of fathers, of homes. Answers. They formed a quiet line. The first sound was not music, but a fragile voice. A girl, perhaps 10, began to sing. Her voice trembled, soft, uncertain, haunting in its rawness. No auto-tune, no tricks. Just honesty. The words sung in Moor needed no translation. The ache was universal. Papa, why didn't you come home? Mama cooks the rice, but your hands are missing. We wait with books, we wait with songs, but the sky answers with silence. One by one, more voices joined, not polished, not harmonious. Off-key at times, but none of that mattered. What filled the chamber wasn't perfection. It was truth, pure, unfiltered, the kind only children carry without breaking. The same room that had roared with fury now wept in stunned silence. Delegates wiped eyes. Translators forgot their headsets. Cameras didn't zoom in. They simply observed. Even Trump, arms crossed, averted his eyes, jaw tight. Regret? Recognition? It was impossible to tell. Victoria remained still. No tears, but her gaze locked on the children had shifted. Calculation gone. Distance dissolved. She looked not like an architect of policy, but like someone staring at the ruins of all she thought indestructible. Ibrahim stood quietly to the side, arms folded, lips firm. He did not interrupt. He listened. Every note a prayer carried to the conscience of the world. The final verse arrived, sung by a boy no taller than the podium. His voice cracked, but he pressed on. "Brother does not answer my call." I wrote him a letter, but the wind took it away. Then silence. Unforced. Unspeakably heavy. The children stared at the assembly, some ashamed, some shattered, all changed. A small girl from the front stepped forward, barefoot, steady. She looked ahead, unblinking. "We don't want revenge," she whispered. "We just want to live." The words, so stark, so stripped of rhetoric, pierced through every speech. Every defense in that sentence, she achieved what no summit, no tribunal, no power ever could. She reminded them all what humanity sounds like. A soldier, still in uniform, lowered his gaze. A reporter, likely in her 60s, leaned toward her microphone and murmured, This is how history feels." The children didn't bow, didn't linger for recognition. They simply turned, one after the other, and filed quietly off. The stage leaving behind nothing but the fading echoes of their song and the lasting shadow of something eternal. Once they had gone, the hall remained frozen. How does one applaud after that? How does one return to policy documents and economic statistics after hearing a melody that reshapes the spirit? The silence wasn't merely emotional, it was reverence, a reverence for purity that had survived. Beyond the reach of politics, reverence for young souls who had discovered how to sing, even while surrounded by flames, and floating above it all. Between heartbreak and healing, something wordless had begun to settle, an understanding that no one present would ever forget. The children were gone, but their voices lingered. Their songs weighed, clung to the chamber, delicate and sacred, like incense drifting in a cathedral. Fragile, unshakable, holy. No one stirred. No one dared disturb the hush that had fallen over the summit like a heavy snowfall. It wasn't the stillness of formalities or protocol. It was the stillness of grief. Raw, shared, undeniable. But Ibrahim Traoré understood that silence couldn't last. Beneath that stillness was a wound yet to be shown, a face yet to be named, a dream crushed beneath the gears of power. If you're watching this while traveling, remember to subscribe and turn on notifications. the voiceover reminded those tuning in online. Ibrahim stepped forward slowly, leather folder still clasped tightly in his grip, pausing behind the lectern. No introduction was necessary. Everyone already sensed that what followed wouldn't be easy, but they didn't anticipate what he would reveal. Not another classified report. Not a damning photograph. Not a diplomatic cable. He reached for something unexpected. A worn, soot-stained notebook. Its cover half-torn, its edges curled, weathered by fire and time. It looked entirely out of place at a summit of global elites. More like something salvaged from a battlefield. This, Ibrahim began softly, was discovered in the debris of a village near Goram Goram. It had been buried beneath fragments of scorched metal, ashes, shattered glass. They'd found no bodies that day, only silence. This notebook. He held it high, the camera zooming gently toward the fragile pages. The first page revealed 7 simple words, scribbled in a child's uneven French. The pencil nearly worn to the wood. Un jour, maman. Je vais la guérir. One day, I will heal my mother. A breath rippled through the audience. The sound people make when sorrow arrives, too slow for screams. Ibrahim carefully turned a few more pages. Childlike drawings. Stick figures holding hands. A crooked sun. A house drawn in lines. Smoke curling from its chimney. One image showed a boy in a white coat. A red cross scribbled across his chest. Underneath the word doctor spelled imperfectly, some letters backward. A family of 3. One figure circled in red with the word mama. His name was Idrissa, Ibrahim said. 8 years old. His village had been labeled a suspected militant corridor. The airstrike that flattened their homes was later recorded as preventive action. The intelligence had come from a private defense firm analyzing terrain risks. No weapons were found, no militants, only Idris's notebook, edges singed. But whole, Ibrahim added no commentary. He didn't seek pity. Simply set the notebook on the podium, as if offering it not to the delegates but to history itself. The room held its breath. The microphones caught the quietest sounds, muffled sobs, teeth clenched against grief. Trump shifted uneasily in his seat. Us. Arms folded tightly across his chest, eyes downcast, jaw rigid. His face locked somewhere between remorse and defiance. Victoria. Langston sat perfectly still. No frown, no blink. But the cool, polished mask she always wore had vanished. And there was no reaction, no defense. Just emptiness, as if the woman who signed target neutralized orders had quietly departed from her own body the moment that notebook appeared. The silence that followed wasn't passive. It was deafening, clawed inside their throats. But refused to become sound, Ibrahim shattered the hush, not with shouting, but with one quiet, brutal truth. We tally foreign aid in billions. His voice steady, low. But we never calculate what it takes from those we claim to help. We call it humanitarian. We call it strategic. He gestured toward the notebook. But Idris's dreams didn't care for strategy. He didn't ask for politics. He only wanted his mother to stop coughing. And then the cameras caught something few expected. A gray-haired man in the second row, a retired NATO officer, lowering his head as tears spilled down his cheeks. His military medals jingled faintly against his chest as his shoulders shook. A woman beside him squeezed his hand, and in that moment, titles, uniforms, borders, none of it mattered. They were simply people, crumbling under a truth that should never have required a notebook to reveal. Ibrahim swept his gaze across the summit diplomats, CEOs, senators, generals, and he spoke the final line. This notebook, ash, is what remains. When justice fails, no applause followed. Because this wasn't a speech, it was a eulogy for a boy, for a generation, for a moral compass buried beneath bureaucracy, and somewhere, maybe in a refugee camp in Mali, maybe in a dusty tent in northern Burkina Faso, another child, perhaps was watching on a flickering screen, wondering if their dreams would ever be heard. But that day, Idris's words were heard. And for once, the world couldn't look away. Just when it felt like the summit could bear no more heartbreak, when the last name had been spoken. The last page turned, something unexpected rippled across the room. A faint crackle buzzed through the speakers. Heads turned, the moderator leaned in, puzzled. Then a voice, small, quivering, not from a president, not from a dignitary. "Child. Captain, are you still there?" Gasps shattered the tension. It wasn't a recording. It was live. Translator rushed to bridge the language gap. But nothing could dilute the raw sincerity in that boy's voice. "I'm Amidu," the boy said. "I live in a camp now. Our village doesn't have a roof anymore, but I still have my voice." The hall fell utterly still. People leaned forward as though they could reach through the speakers themselves. "Thank you, Captain," Amadou continued. "Thank you for saying what no one else will, for telling them. We're still here." Ibrahim froze, his hand resting atop Idris's notebook, clenched. Looked skyward, not to the crowd, not to the cameras, but to the invisible space where the boy surely sat, speaking across continents. "I want you to know." Amadou's voice cracked. "I forgive them." Those 4 words unraveled the entire room. It was no longer a summit. It wasn't a debate. It became sacred. Donald Trump, master of bravado and deflection, sat motionless. His jaw set firm, but the facade broke. A single tear traced his cheek. He didn't brush it away. Perhaps he didn't even notice. Ibrahim's chest tightened. His lips parted, but no words came. Only the raw, silent ache that rises slowly from the chest. He lowered his head, not in defeat, but in reverence. He had faced tyrants, generals, death itself. But this was different. Amadou's forgiveness wasn't strategy. It was reckoning. "If you're watching while on the move," the broadcast reminded softly, "don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications." Victoria Langston didn't cry. She didn't lift her head. Her hands stayed folded neatly. In her lap, her eyes fixed, just beyond her own dignity. The woman who once penned collateral zones and sterile memos now faced something her words had no armor against: mercy. There is no defense against a child's forgiveness. The line remained open. Wind whistled faintly behind Amadou's voice, the sound of life beneath tarpaulin roofs, where hopes must be whispered to keep from being stolen. "I just wanted them to know," Amadou said, barely audible. "I'm still here." Voice cracked, rough and uneven. "You are not forgotten," he managed, his voice breaking mid-sentence. "You are why I came." The grand hall, full of world leaders, analysts, military men, sat humbled, stripped of power, reminded by a displaced 7-year-old of everything they had abandoned, and then one last offering. "I still draw," Amadou added. "Not in the dirt now. Someone gave me paper. I draw my village, how it used to be. Sometimes I draw clouds over it because maybe God is watching." He paused, voice trembling, "and I hope he's listening too." Amadou's hand covered his mouth, his shoulders shaking. Gosh, there were no more speeches to deliver, no more briefings to share. What remained to say? When a child with nothing but memories had just shown more grace than the global community had in years? The moderator's voice wavered as he returned to the microphone. We thank Amadou for his voice, his courage, his heart." But no procedure remained to guide them through this moment. Some delegates rose, others wept freely, closed their eyes, unable to process what they'd witnessed. The camera crews, typically tight, controlled, let their lenses drift wide, capturing the whole room. The stillness, the brokenness, the awe. Because sometimes, it's the most powerful thing a camera can do, simply witness. And there in the quiet left behind by a child's voice. The world didn't shift from politics or policy. It shifted because Amadou, stripped of everything but words and memories, had chosen to forgive. Not because it was easy, but because it was all he had left to offer. And somehow it was enough. The chamber remained frozen. Amadou's words lingering like smoke. Even the fluorescent lights overhead dimmed, so the summit itself had bowed its head. No one reached for their phones. No one cleared their throat to move on. Time itself paused to hear a child. A truth, a reckoning long denied. And then a moment unplanned, unsanctioned. Donald Trump stood. No fanfare, no music, no lighting shift. He simply The first time in his public life, he looked out at the room, not with bravado, but something raw, unfamiliar. When he finally spoke, bravado was gone. It wasn't the voice of a politician seeking applause. It was something quieter, rougher, like a man realizing. To say, "Sorry," Trump began, voice steady, low. "I came because I believed I was right. What we did, I thought it was for order, for safety, for control." He scanned the room, some faces hardened, others damp with tears. But every gaze fixed on him. "But I see now. I never listened." He paused longer now, swallowing hard. "I never heard voices like Amadou's, like Idris's, like all of theirs. I didn't truly grasp what our policies caused when the cameras stopped rolling, when the aid teams packed up, when the papers were stamped and filed away. I never saw clearly what our silence permitted." He drew in a breath, his chest heavy. "And I apologize for every village we reduced to ashes. For every child who believed we were bringing hope, but received only ruins in return." Then, standing before thousands of diplomats, generals, journalists, and skeptics, he extended his hand toward Ibrahim Traoré. The simple act made the entire summit freeze, not because it was anticipated, but because it was unimaginable. For the first time since this summit began, a former U.S. president reached across not to strike a bargain, not to sign some treaty, but to seek forgiveness. But Ibrahim did not accept the hand. His eyes lingered on it, then lifted to meet the face behind it. Slowly, he shook his head. His words were free of anger, but sharp as a blade, slicing through the remaining illusion in the hall. "I don't need your handshake, Mr. Trump," he stated, his voice steady. "I need your honesty. I need this world to stop burying our dead beneath words like assistance and national interest. I need truth, not another empty gesture for the cameras." The hand between them hovered for a breath, then fell. And somehow, that unspoken rejection resounded louder than any handshake could have. And then, something even more unexpected unfolded. One after another, the summit's attendees rose not to cheer, but to stand together in regret and responsibility shared. The German delegate stood first, her voice strong but lined with emotion, slicing through the heavy air. "We pledge to launch an independent inquiry into all past development deals and military engagements involving African nations under our oversight." Next, the Chilean representative rose. "We will unlock our archives. We will reveal every confidential document related to joint operations in Burkina Faso and neighboring countries." Then Canada. Then Norway, Ghana, Ireland. Their voices filled the chamber not with rehearsed slogans, but with sincere promises. Real commitments to truth, to accountability, to justice. No party slogans, no nationalistic flag waving. Just experienced leaders, many with decades in politics, choosing perhaps for the first time not to turn away. If you're seeing this while on the move, remember to subscribe and enable notifications on our YouTube channel. Cameras throughout the venue adjusted to capture the moment. But even the journalists moved softly, with reverence, as if filming a quiet funeral for old deceptions finally laid to rest. And still, Ibrahim remained silent. He didn't gloat. He didn't even nod. He simply observed. And in his silence echoed the presence of millions of unseen witnesses, people whose names were never spoken in these grand halls, but whose stolen lives demanded recognition now. Victoria Langston stayed seated. Her hands remained folded. But her expression was different now. There was something hollow behind her eyes, something fractured. It wasn't defeat exactly. It was colder, the dawning realization that her grip on the narrative had slipped away. The moment a child forgave what she refused to name. Trump returned to his chair quietly. He didn't utter another word. Whatever part of him still clung to the script unraveled entirely. For perhaps the first time in his life, he sat not as a leader, but as a man who had finally heard the truth from a child's lips, with nothing left to argue. The summit, once veiled in prestige and pride, now stood stripped, bare, humbled. What had begun as another exercise in global influence became something else's sacred space. A place where a simple note outweighed any formal treaty, where a child's absence judged entire nations, and where a refused handshake became the purest moment of global honesty. Because truth, once spoken plainly, cannot be unsaid. Once alive with arguments and declarations, now pulsed with a deep, reverent stillness. The apologies had been offered. The fury had burned itself out. What remained was ashes soft, final, undeniable. In that hush, no one dared to move. Not from fear, but from respect. As though everyone present sensed the final moment had not yet arrived. And when it did, it wouldn't roar. It would break the silence, quietly, devastatingly. And then Ibrahim rose once more. He didn't walk to the lectern. He didn't lift any new papers or glance at the rows of leaders behind him. Instead, he walked slowly, deliberately, toward a lone chair placed at the far edge of the stage. It was modest, unremarkable, empty. On its seat lay a folded white card, written in careful black ink. Amadou Sawigo, age 7, absent due to war. A collective breath caught in the hall. The camera zoomed gently in. No one spoke, not even the moderators. Ibrahim paused before the vacant chair, resting a hand lightly on its back. From inside his coat, he pulled a small, worn paper, the edges frayed from too many hands holding it. Too many years passing, he opened it with the reverence of someone handling a sacred relic. His eyes swept the audience, not locking onto any one face, but through them, all's, though addressing every mother who had ever buried a child forgotten by headlines, ignored by policymakers. This, he whispered, was written by Amadou's mother days before the attack. She meant to give it to him when he came home from school, but he never did. His eyes fell to the paper as his voice softened, reading aloud. "My son," the note began, his fingers trembling slightly. "Wherever life carries you, speak the truth even if your voice shakes, even if no one listens. The world needs hearts like yours, small but fearless, gentle but unbreakable. Never forgets. It may shield you, but truth saves others." His voice wavered, his throat tightening. The paper dipped slightly in his hand. "Speak, even if it costs you comfort, even if it costs you safety. Speak, my son, because there are children who cannot. And someone somewhere needs to hear the words only you can give." A sob slipped from somewhere in the room, then another. Then many more, not staged, not theatrical, but raw, unfiltered grief. These were not the polished tears of diplomats. These were the broken weeping of people who, for the first time in years, had stopped watching from the sidelines. Victoria Langston remained silent. Her posture slumped. The sharp, commanding air around her had faded, leaving only emptiness. Her gaze stayed fixed on the floor as though even she could no longer carry the weight of her justifications. But no one watched her now. She was an afterthought, an artifact of a power system overshadowed by something far greater. A mother's words. A child's name. An empty chair. Ibrahim carefully refolded the letter, smoothing the crease with his palm, then placed it gently on the chair's seat. He stepped back, head bowed, like one standing at a grave without a stone-only memory. In that moment, the chair wasn't just a prop. It became a monument, not of marble, not of bronze, but of absence. Of all the names never spoken, the children never seen, the lives buried beneath spreadsheets, military briefings, and terms like geostrategic necessity. And in that stillness, something fractured, not just inside the hall but across the world. Time zones, borders, screens it, reached beyond. In living rooms, in offices, in crowded internet cafes, people watched, breath held. Some whispered Amadou's name. Others wept openly. A veteran in Virginia switched off the TV and stared at the floor. A grandmother in Minnesota muttered, "Lord, forgive us." A nurse in Nairobi clutched her daughter tighter, because that chair, the small, fragile chairs poke what no policy paper could. It declared, "We failed you." More importantly, it asked, "Will we fail others too?" As Ibrahim returned to center stage, his eyes swept the room. His voice was low, but every syllable carried weight. "If peace is what we seek," he said, "then truth is where we begin. If justice is our goal, courage must guide us. And if we hope to save tomorrow, we must listen to the children who cry unseen in the dark. If you're hearing this while on the go, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. No one clapped. Not because they didn't want to, but because applause felt too small for this moment. That modest chair, holding only a letter and a child's name, had spoken more than all the speeches ever delivered. The summit neared its end, but the reckoning had only begun. There was no gavel, no flashy press conference. Not as a soldier, but simply as a witness. His voice, when it broke the hush, carried no anger, but something far stronger. Conviction. If peace is our desire, he said, let us begin with truth. No theatrics, no accusations. Only undeniable, simple truth. He allowed the words to settle like dust after a storm. But then he stepped back. Slowly he bowed, not in submission, but in reverence. Reverence for the lost children, the grieving mothers, the silenced voices that now echoed worldwide as he rose. The cameras captured something remarkable. The delegates stood, not out of courtesy, but with the silent understanding they had. Just witnessed something deeper than policy, a moment that struck the soul. It wasn't about whose nation was right. It was about whose heart had the courage to speak when the price was highest. Across live streams, from Ghana to Mississippi, Nairobi to Detroit, refugee camps to boardrooms, the world answered as one. We stand with Amadou. Truth is the beginning of peace. No more silence. In languages the summit never officially translated, the message still rang clear, and then the screen dimmed. No closing credits, no commentary, only the faint sound of children's voices, soft, steady, in a language unknown to many, yet understood by every heart. It wasn't an anthem. It wasn't politics. It was older than nations, deeper than speeches, a song woven from lullabies, whispered prayers, and all the farewells never said. A song for those who never returned. A song for those still waiting. A song pleading with the world, listen, just once, with your heart, and in that darkness, not through vengeance, but through the raw, beautiful ache of truth finally spoken. The summit ended, but the world was forever changed. Some stories don't just inform, they haunt. They stay long after the screen fades to black. The Geneva summit was intended as another diplomatic routine. Instead, it became a mirror held to humanity's conscience. Through Ibrahim Traoré's eyes, through Amadou's absent chair, we were reminded behind every statistic is a life, a child, a dream, a color, a mother waiting. We learned peace cannot be drafted behind locked doors if truth remains outside. We learned aid without accountability destroys as surely as bombs. And above all, we learned silence, however well-meaning, easily becomes complicity. But the most vital lesson came not from leaders, but from a child's chair and a mother's hope. Courage isn't born of military might or political clout. It lives in speaking, even when your voice quivers. Here's your call to action. Don't look away. Don't scroll past. Share this. Carry it into your conversations, into your community, into your heart. If you believe every child matters, speak up. Change doesn't begin in chambers. It begins with you. If this moved you, comment below. What moment stayed with you? What will you carry forward? Like, share, subscribe. The world needs more listeners. The world needs you.